okay, calculus, okay, you got to get your AP, this and other thing. Not everyone needs to go to college, which is the next thing to hit. People commonly ask, "Oh, what college should I send my child to?" And I say, "Well, what do they do?" "Well, it's been hard educating them. They don't really seem interested." Do not send them to college. They literally turn white. What? How can you say that? I always say, do not send your children to college unless, for now anyway, in the current environment in most colleges, I usually caution, unless you're going to do math and science, do not send them to college. And generally, in my estimation, that's true. You do not want to send them to college because it is a waste of your money. They could learn, because what you're paying for is disproportionate to what you get. The same education you get there, you could easily get by teaching your children reading skills for attainment of knowledge by themselves, and give them good books that are well footnoted, teach them on reporting and sourcing, things of that sort, so that if they're going to get in the arts, they could learn it themselves. And that's because what it does is it puts a burden on the system so that the people who do need to get in academia, guess what? They have to pay more. Why? Because everyone and their mom is using this service now. And everyone and their neighbor's dog is getting loans from everyone else, which, guess what? Stresses out the financial system and other things. So that's where we're at. We're at a system that what it provides is disproportionate to what is paid. And that's not just true of college. Let's look at what we pay per high school student. The United States spends more money per student than any country in the industrial world. For that matter, many countries put together. You can put it that way. Yet, we do not produce children with abilities half as good as some countries singly. Why? We don't provide a system that actually provides knowledge that's attained. We just provide the knowledge, just throw it at them. It doesn't necessarily mean they get it. And then if they don't get it, because we're packing them in 50 and 60 a class, you have to deal with them and hope that they don't overwhelm and kill the teacher. That's another problem. Overcrowding, but that's not something we can get into here. So funding. Why is funding so disproportionate? It's not because of bad teachers. I mean, there are bad teachers out there, admit it. But I've worked in 4 public schools for an extended, for no less than a year, in 4 different public high schools. There are very good teachers. They're not Catholic, or they're not Protestant, or they're not, Orthodox. They're not necessarily people with faith, and maybe they register liberal, maybe they voted Obama. I don't know. I frankly don't care. That when it comes to their subject and sitting in the classroom, they know what they're doing. We're not in a want for good teachers in many cases, obviously not all. We are in a want for a system that allows them to function, and that actually aims toward the education of children, and that is the problem. And what we're seeing is, well, let's just throw more money at it. Let's increase the Department of Education. Let's do this. So what's the solution to this money problem? Spending so much money on education and wasting it every year, I guess, through these middle companies, through this thing. What we have to do is eliminate the central bureaucracy. Frankly, I don't advocate any money from a central government going to pay for local education, but even assuming they just eliminated that and gave half of that money to local municipalities that was originally going to the Department of Education, that would be a plus. Why? Because local education, local educators, town councilmen accountable to the voters, to the local voters, will have a better idea what to do than, say, the Department of Education, or a federal court, or some other such thing. The problem is, and that's endemic of the entire situation of our society, people don't know who their town selectman is, or their mayor, or whatever else. They don't know who sits on their town council and votes in the decisions and keeps putting in the bills for taxes that they keep voting down. And they vote them back in anywhere. They don't even show up, and maybe 5 to 10% of the people who live in that town actually vote those people in year after year, who have more control over you than your congressman or senator. Because of television, largely because of the industrial media complex, we are so parentally focused on Washington, what the president is doing, what the Congress is doing, that we have no attention to our local governments. Right? Watch for me to start on third parties in another talk. So because of that, we lost control. And the same thing's true with education. We are completely out of touch with the local government. Now, what if you abolish the Department of Education? I mean, frankly, in my view, you abolish that money, and everything comes locally, and you create local education designed to address the things that the local people need and want. That's accountable to them. And you have them educated, and you even offer homeschool co-ops and outsource for people and whatnot, things like that, right? Large cities, you know, the burden's much stronger than in a small town or municipality, but they're in control of it, not the federal government. So now at the local level, what does the state provide? Right? You know, I'm not a fan of kindergarten. I frankly say eliminate kindergarten. It's just babysitting. All those simple things parents can and should be teaching them. But that goes back to society and the breakdown of the family. So for now, let's just focus on, at approximately age 7 or 8, the school should be providing grammar, and frankly, I'm all for logic and rhetoric too, in a gradually increasing way, and also basic arithmetic. Right? We teach our kids in AP calculus, and the same kid gets a job at the grocery store and cannot figure out how to hand the change back to you when they put the tender wrong. There's a problem with our math system. We need to focus on basic arithmetic. Focus on all the necessary elements, how to conduct the operations sensibly, and apply it so it's not abstract to real life. Focus on multiplication, focusing on division, focusing on fractions and exponents, and all the major things going into integers that we have to deal with. And then on geometry, that's the next practical thing that everyone can use to some extent. And then a basic algebra at the end, which is the equivalent of our current 8th or 9th grade, would be good. Basic literature. Right? You want basic history. Ancient history is always good, the history of Western civilization. Everybody's going, oh, what about these other civilizations? If somebody wants to study it, that's great. Otherwise, it should be relegated to world history. And I love history. I love cultures, that even non-Western cultures. The history of India, history of Japan, history of China. I'm fascinated by it. Doesn't matter to me that it's not Western. That's not the issue. What are the bedrocks of our common culture? Well, it's not the Mandarin dynasty. It's not the shogunate of Tokugawa Ieyasu. Right? It's not, the Hindus. Oh, there is contact, say, with the Hindus and the Greeks and the coming of Hindu math through the Arabs and those sort of things. It's not Islamic culture. Those are not the things that form Western culture, right? If I was living in Cairo, I would expect to be learning Asiatic culture and Arab history. That would be kind of expected. So we should be learning Western civilization. Not because it is somehow, better because it's ours. And it goes toward patriotism. And what's toward patriotism? It's part of the virtue of piety, reverence for your elders, reverence for those over you, etc. And that's what we need as a culture. That's what we need to have over us. Right? Is the reverence, the piety for our ancestors, which is love of tradition. There's this great phrase in St. Paul, in his first letter to the Corinthians, in the Vulgate. Tradidi quod accipi. I handed on what I received. Tradidi, same word from which tradition comes from. I handed down quod accipi. What does that mean? Quod accipi. Well, that means it was not his. He didn't come up with it. He didn't make it. It wasn't made by a committee sitting around, well, let's look at our next target group. And that's not how St. Paul came by what he passed on to all the communities he preached to. Someone else gave it to him, namely God. Namely the apostles, who received revelation directly from Jesus Christ. They gave it to St. Paul, and St. Paul handed it on. In this, it doesn't even have to apply to religion. That is the bedrock principle for the establishment of culture, society, and civilization. That's how we get it. It's as simple